Honorable Minister, please.
Your Excellency Udayanga Weeratunga, Ambassador of Sri Lanka to the Russian Federation. Your Excellencies who have been kind enough to accept the invitation of our Ambassador and to be present here this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, I am very happy to be here with you, as was pointed out to you a few minutes ago, on my third visit to this great country, and I had the pleasure of a bilateral discussion with my counterpart in the Russian Federation, His Excellency Sergei Lavrov, who incidentally began his a very distinguished diplomatic career in my country. His first diplomatic posting was in the early 70s in Sri Lanka, and even this morning, Foreign Minister Lavrov of the Russian Federation recalled his very happy and productive time in Toronto, and that was very much the spirit in which the bilateral discussions took place this morning. Now, what I would like to do, if I may, briefly this afternoon, is to tell you something about the current situation in my country, maybe certain nuances of that situation with which you may not be sufficiently familiar, although I'm sure that in a broad sense you have been following some of the major developments in Sri Lanka. You are probably aware that Sri Lanka is a country with great potential. Indeed, that potential was largely realized at the time we got independence from the British. That was way back in 1948. Because at that time we had by far the highest per capita income in that part of the country. And no less a figure than Lee Kuan Yew, the architect of modern Singapore, in his very famous 2-volume autobiography, The Singapore Story from Third World to First, described Ceylon, as our country was then called, as an example for economic development throughout the British Commonwealth. But after that, of course, we were overwhelmed by the problem of terrorism, and it is that held us back for 30 long years. In the introduction of me, the overly generous introduction of me a few minutes ago, reference was made to the many responsibilities which I have discharged in governments in Sri Lanka during the last decade and a half. Now, in every one of those capacities, I was personally aware how difficult it was to promote the interests of Sri Lanka in trade and commerce, investment, tourism, any of those sectors, while there was a ferocious conflict raging within our shores. And this was a combat between a sovereign, lawful, democratic government on the one hand, and a ruthless terrorist organization which was described by the Federal Bureau of Investigation in the United States, the FBI, as the most feared, the most deadly terrorist outfit anywhere on the planet. So that is what held us back. Now happily that is over. It's no longer there. The hostilities came to an end in May 2009. The war was not of our making or choosing. On the contrary, the government of Sri Lanka, under His Excellency President Mahinda Rajapaksa, made every effort to engage the liberation tigers in political discussions. He sent his ministers to Geneva and to Oslo. On one occasion, the LTT was present in Geneva but did not come into the room where the negotiations were. So there was an absolute refusal on the part of the terrorist organization to take part in these discussions with any degree of seriousness of purpose. That is because they believed that they could not be defeated in battle, that they were militarily invincible. Therefore, they took no serious interest in any form of negotiation which could hopefully have led at that time to a political settlement. They spurned it, they rejected it with contempt. It is because of that attitude on the part of the LTTE, a persistent attitude, which they were not prepared to abandon at any time, that every means had to be adopted by the government of Sri Lanka, discharging its responsibility to the people of the country, who have now been delivered from the scourge of terrorism. Some of your excellencies represent countries close to us, others countries that are far away. But whatever country you come from, I invite you very cordially to visit Sri Lanka and to see for yourself the very encouraging, indeed the inspiring developments that are taking place right now in Sri Lanka. Now, if you ask me, what is the most striking thing that any of you would observe if you come to Sri Lanka, as indeed I hope you will, those of you who have not already visited that country? What is most striking is a sense of emancipation, of freedom from fear. Because more than anything else, it was fear that gripped Sri Lanka during this ferocious conflict, which spanned, as I say, a little more than a quarter of a century. It was total uncertainty. Life and limb not safe. Nobody could say within the next few hours what would happen. People who left their homes in the morning to go to work could never be certain that they would come back home alive. A family sending their child off to school in the morning lived in constant fear that the child may be harmed before he or she came home at the end of the day. I'm not exaggerating. At that time, the reality of the situation was that if the father had to travel, let us say, from one city to another in our country, the father would always take care to see that he traveled by bus, and if the mother had to travel to the same destination, the mother would go by train. They would not travel together at the same time. Because if one of them was blown up in a terrorist bomb, the father wanted to make certain that at least one parent would survive in order to see to the well-being of their child. So this was the attitude of the mother, it was also the attitude of the father. There is a kind of society we lived in during the whole of that period. I myself have shrapnel in my lung. That was not a bomb that was intended for me, it was intended for the previous president. I happened to be attending that rally at the same time. So I was one of the lucky ones. I'm still alive. Many of my colleagues are not. But it is not only members of government who are affected by the violence. Ordinary people in temples, in churches, in schools, in marketplaces, in bus stops, all these people fell victims of violence. People who were praying, they were not spared. So that is a ruthless terrorism from which the country has extricated itself after so long a period. So that is over. Now, the responsibility of President Rajapaksa's government at the end of that period, when hostilities terminated, was to decide on the priorities. How do we move the country forward? What are the things that we need to attend to immediately? And what are the things that call for attention further down the road? So there had to be identification of priorities. Many problems, complex problems. So we can't deal with all of them at the same time. There had to be a structured process which President Rajapaksa's government set in motion. Now, underpinning all of this is the deep realization that the country today has the advantage of a unique opportunity, which we did not have for such a long time, a unique opportunity, to use the country's natural strengths, most of all the high caliber of its human resources. We have about 97% literacy in our country, which is a proud record for any South Asian nation. Now, how do we exploit all these inherent advantages in order to confer on all the people who inhabit the island the largest possible measure of benefit? Irrespective of what language they speak, what religion they profess, what cultural background they come from. In a spirit of inclusivity, including them all, how do we move the country forward? That was the central challenge. Now, we decided that the first thing we ought to do is to deal with the problems of the internally displaced people. There were exactly 297,000 of them at the time of the cessation of hostilities. That's a large number by this time. So we had to resettle them, allow them to start a new life. Now we have almost totally accomplished that task. 98% of the people who are internally displaced by the conflict have now been rehabilitated in the society, have been resettled. There's also the very moving, the very touching human story connected with the ex-combatants, the people who were persuaded, who were misguided, to take up arms against the state. There were about 11,600 of them at the time the war came to an end, including 595 child soldiers, 595 child soldiers. Now, 90% of those people have been reabsorbed into society after the advantage of exposure to programs of vocational training, which would equip them to earn their living and to live with their heads held high, with dignity in their country. To turn the page, move on, leave the past behind them, and to live with a sense of satisfaction as useful citizens of Sri Lanka. That's it. Then the whole issue of economic development, because we believe that that is central to reconciliation. You know, after a painful conflict of this sort, the need of the hour is reconciliation. This has happened in many countries in similar situations. So you speak of South Africa, or Chile, or Cambodia, after a period like this. A time of healing, to heal the wounds that violence has inflicted on people, to remove the scars, to do away with the pain and the anguish, reconciliation. Now that's not something you can do overnight. It's not like building a house or constructing a road or a tank to provide water for irrigation. You're dealing with the hearts and minds of people, and that involves the transformation of attitudes. So it is not a single event, it is rather a process. Now that process has been set in motion in a very methodical and systematic manner, systematic way by the government of President Udayanga. What is reconciliation? What are the different elements that it consists of? We believe that one of the central components is economic development. Without some degree of economic contentment and satisfaction, you cannot have a viable and realistic reconciliation process. People are angry, embittered, disgruntled. Then to talk of reconciliation would be meaningless. Therefore, you have to uplift the economy, improve the living conditions of people, especially in those parts of the country which have been ravaged by the conflict. So as far as economic development is concerned, we have put the focus on the northern part of the country, which was the area greatly affected. Now there are other parts of the country are not affected, but the main area of devastation was, of course, the northern province. Now, while the rest of the country is developing by 8.3%, it is the economy of the rest of Sri Lanka is developing by 8.3%, the economy of the northern province is growing at a much faster pace and is approaching the threshold of almost 22%. This is because of a sharp emphasis on infrastructure, roads, railroad systems, irrigation, power and energy, the rebuilding of schools and hospitals, providing water for fields which were destroyed by the LTT. All of this is happening in the north. People are beginning to discover a new meaning in life. They are not afraid anymore. Industries are starting, hotels are being built, fisheries, which was interrupted for a very long period because of the conflict at sea, that is being revived. The cultivation of tropical fruits and vegetables, for which the climatic conditions and the soil of the northern province is particularly conducive. All these things are happening. So there is an economic revival. This means the percolation of economic benefits down to the grassroots level, generation of employment. The state banks are giving loans, especially to the small and medium sector, so that people are leading far, far better lives today than they ever did at any time during the last 3 decades. So that's what's happening. Now all of that is good, it's essential, but it's not enough. There are other things that we need to do. And the other part of President Rajapaksa's thrust, his initiative, has to do with identifying the constitutional and political changes which are appropriate at this stage of the development of the country. No constitution is written in stone. No law is intended to operate in perpetuity. They need to be changed, to be restructured and modified in keeping the changing social circumstances and the priorities of a particular time. Therefore, President Rajapaksa has proposed the appointment of a parliamentary select committee consisting of all the political parties in the Sri Lankan parliament to get together in a multi-party forum to address the imperatives of constitutional reform and to effect the kinds of changes that are necessary to give expression to the aspirations of our people as we emerge from the shadow of this painful conflict and as we confront the future with confidence. So that's where we are with regard to constitutional reform. And exactly 1 week ago, there was a very important meeting in Colombo between the President of Sri Lanka and the leader of the opposition in order to explore ways and means of getting the major Tamil political parties also to take part fully in the deliberations of the parliamentary select committee. So what I am telling you is that every aspect has been catered for. The humanitarian aspect, the social aspect, the economic aspect, cultural aspect, and the constitutional aspect. So it is a multifaceted exercise, which does not leave anything undone. It does not neglect any particular area. So it is a comprehensive strategy which takes into account what needs to be done in each of these different sectors. So that is why we say that the government of Sri Lanka needs support from the international community. This is the message which came loud and clear from Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov of the Russian Federation. He said that Russia understands the feelings of Sri Lanka, Russia understands what is now being done, and Russia stands by Sri Lanka in a spirit of full solidarity and understanding with the objectives that we have set ourselves and the aims that we hope to accomplish. So to conclude my remarks to you this afternoon, may I just summarize what we would like from the international community. The first is a recognition that the main responsibility for finding a solution to these complex problems is that of the people of Sri Lanka. The people of Sri Lanka are responsible for their destiny, and the whole international political and legal order is founded upon the premise that local remedies and local procedures should be given precedence. So, Sri Lanka should be encouraged to find solutions which reflect the aspirations and the culture of our own people, the Sri Lankan people. There's no size that fits everybody. A solution, however successful it may be, which has been worked out in the context of a different culture, will not yield the kinds of results we expect if it is transplanted mechanically into Sri Lankan soil. And if you try to implement in Sri Lanka a foreign solution, which does not cater for the needs and the aspirations of our people, then it will be a futile exercise. So a realistic approach to reconciliation in Sri Lanka must be based on a homegrown solution, which is what we are doing our best to evolve. So that's one fundamental consideration. Of course, the international community has a role to play. We would like to engage with the international community to share experiences, but the ultimate responsibility, the power of decision making, must belong, without any shadow of doubt, to the government and the people of Sri Lanka. Secondly, we think that Sri Lanka must be given credit for its legitimate accomplishments. We have achieved a lot against overwhelming odds, under excruciatingly difficult circumstances. It wasn't easy. Not easy to resettle 300,000 people in 2.5 years. We have done all that. Now, that needs recognition and acknowledgement. That is only fair. I'm not saying everything is perfect. It cannot be. A 30-year conflict, everything can't be resolved in 2.5 years. But Sri Lanka is certainly entitled to credit for the very difficult tasks which have been satisfactorily achieved within the remarkably brief time span of 3 years which have elapsed since the end of the conflict. So that's the second point. The third point I would suggest is that other countries can help us in a variety of ways. For example, by taking advantage of the abundant economic opportunities which are now available in Sri Lanka. This was one of the matters that I discussed with the Foreign Minister Lavrov of the Russian Federation. Already there's a great deal of interest on the part of Russian companies in coming into Sri Lanka. Gazprom is a good example. President Rajapaksa himself visited Gazprom. We saw a photograph on that screen a few minutes ago. I had the pleasure of accompanying him on that visit. It's probably the largest gas company in the world. We greatly admired the work they were doing all over the world, including in South Asia. They are showing a great deal of interest in coming into our country. We want to work with them, not only in the field of liquid natural gas, but also in respect of oil exploration, which is a current priority in our country. I think we need to formalize further the relationships between the business sectors in our two countries, and with that objective in view, Sri Lanka has made a proposal with regard to the establishment of a branch of the Bank of Ceylon, the largest state bank in our country, in Moscow. And we were told that that proposal is receiving the active consideration of the government of the Russian Federation. There can be a lot of contact. Tourism is the most visible growth area of the Sri Lankan economy. And Foreign Minister Lavrov said that he was very happy to note that the number of tourist arrivals into Sri Lanka from Russia has increased by as much as 30% during the last year. The Russian government has given us approval for 5 flights every week by Sri Lankan Airlines between Moscow and London. And of that 5, 2 are already in place. So there's a lot happening between our countries. There are also proposals with regard to modalities for enhancing the volumes of the tea trade. Tea represents 70% of our exports from Sri Lanka into Russia. So in each of these sectors, I think there is abundant scope to work even more closely together in the future, now that peace and stability can return to our country. So that is very much the spirit in which we hope to work with you in the future, not only government to government, but also people to people contact. There's a lot happening, for example, in higher education. Russia has increased the number of scholarships that they offer us from 25 to 30, and as a reciprocal, even though modest gesture, we have started by offering 5 scholarships to Russian students in Sri Lankan universities, and it is our intention to increase that number as we go along. So, I think we are at a juncture in the development of our bilateral relationship at which we can add to it, we can add value to an already strong and vibrant relationship. As far as the political aspect is concerned, it cannot be better. We work very cordially and productively together, both regionally and internationally. In ACB, that's the Asia Cooperation Dialogue, the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, we work very closely in the United Nations system, in the specialized agencies of the United Nations. There is a very high degree of understanding and solidarity between our two countries. But now we can add a new dimension, and that is the economic dimension. So that is what we consider in particular in the course of the bilateral talks which I had this morning with my counterpart in the Russian situation. So in conclusion then, I would like to thank you once more for accepting so readily the invitation extended by our ambassador to come here to his residence this afternoon. Ambassador Udayanga Weeratunga is doing yeoman service to our country here. In fact, Foreign Minister Lavrov jokingly commented this morning that he is a Russian speaker, a Russian thinker, and also a Russian drinker. So, in all 3 of these respects, each as important as the other, our ambassador has identified fully and unreservedly the culture, the traditions, the mindset of the Russian people, and I think that is the key to the excellent rapport that he has been able to establish on behalf of his country and his people with the government and the people of the Russian Federation. So we are very proud of our ambassador. We are very proud of the network that he has established in this country to promote greater understanding between our two countries and to move this relationship forward onto a different plane, a higher plane, now that the pain and the sorrow and the anguish that inevitably comes with any armed conflict is happily behind us. So I thank you again, I felicitate you, we greatly appreciate your attendance, and let us all resolve to work together to our mutual advantage. The ingredients are all in place, and I ask you, with a very vibrant support of the government of the Russian Federation, of which we saw very clear evidence this morning, so buttressed by that, greatly encouraged and enthused by that, let us all work together to strengthen and consolidate this relationship. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, now I invite His Excellency the Ambassador to present a collection of Moscow Cloth, an electronic magazine which this embassy has published monthly for the last 5 years, to the Honorable Minister.
Дорогие друзья, я хочу пригласить вас всех, чтобы чувствовать лангийский кухню и попробовать которые моя супруга приготовили для вас. И поэтому прошу всех следующий этап нашего мероприятия. И я еще раз хочу от имени посольства, лично от моего семьи, благодарить вас, что вы пришли и соединили нашу компанию. Спасибо еще раз. Прошу вас.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, His Excellency Udayanga Weeratunga invites you for a traditional Sri Lankan meal specially prepared by Uma Weeratunga. Please